just start by saying it's been a great morning and day, hasn't it? I mean, I just think some of the talks and the speakers have been so insightful. And my job's in technology, but I've learned quite a lot today. And I'm sure you'll all join me in thanking everyone who's put this together. And I should explain that my job in the BBC is Head of Emerging Technology and Strategic Direction. Bit of a mouthful, but what it actually means is that I scan the horizon, the near-term horizon, for developments that will impact our society, the BBC's audiences, and the BBC. Looking at technology developments that we can use to make the BBC experience for our audiences a lot better. And as part of that role, I think there's two things that I want to really touch on in this talk. The first one is, how do you decide that something is of importance? How do you decide that it's going to be transformational, it's going to be disruptive? The second one is, what do you do around delivering value for people, for audiences? And this is why my talk is around AI and culture. And I should explain that my view of disruption and transformation is that something is truly transformational if it's going to change the relationship that already exists, or it's going to help develop a new relationship. I believe AI and machine learning, and deep learning in particular, is one of those things. So I'm going to touch on that. The second is that many of you, if you've been in IT, if you've been in technology for some time, you'll have heard of the concept of technology debt. This is the legacy technology that you build up that sometimes stops you from innovating and being fast to market. Well, increasingly, we need to think about culture debt. How are we going to bring along our customers, our audience members, our staff members, in the changes that we as technology innovators are trying to promote? Now, I've been told many times that if you get the afternoon slot after everyone's had lunch, by this stage in the afternoon, you've been overstimulated, loads of messages coming at you. What you should do is you should open with a joke to get everyone really pepped up. But my jokes are terrible. Right, so I've decided to go a different way. So I thought we'd start with some maths. So grab your pens and your paper and solve for x. No, we're not going to do that. But what I do want to know is, does anybody recognize these equations? Just put your hands up if you do. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to ask you to shout it out. I'm going to trust that you are not lying and that you know what you're talking about. These are Maxwell's field equations. They describe how electromagnetic waves propagate through free space. James Clerk Maxwell was a genius. He worked in the 1800s. It's his theory that underpins so much of what we do today. So much of the technology has been enabled by this theory. So if you've got a mobile phone in your pocket, you can thank him. Satellites, you can thank him. So much of what we rely on in our digital economy and digital landscape, we can thank James. And in the 1800s, there were a huge amount of theorists and experimenters who were trying to figure out what to do around understanding electricity and magnetism. They were doing it for the intellectual stimulation. That's what was motivating them. But it took some entrepreneurs to realize there was some commercial opportunity here. Entrepreneurs like Marconi and Tesla, who came along and realized that actually there was an opportunity here. But one of the things that they really realized, Marconi and Tesla and people like them, was that the medium of radio, for example, electromagnetic radiation, radio is one type of propagation. The medium of radio has no value if there is nothing that it enables. And so the medium is not the message. It's really important to understand that. What they realized was that if they could enable communication between people, if they could enable the dissemination of content to people, that's where the value was. And that's what they were building their businesses on. So let's fast forward a little bit from the 1800s into the early 1900s, around 1920. And broadcasting was being developed in the way that we've recognized it over the last century. In the UK, a strange thing happened. Lots of radio manufacturers were lobbying the agency that issues the broadcasting licenses to say, give us a license, we want to broadcast, we want to broadcast. And the agency decided to do a strange thing. It issued one license to a consortium of radio manufacturers, and in that moment, in 1922, the BBC was born. So the BBC was founded off the back of entrepreneurship. It was really a reaction to the opportunity that was seen by those few people who recognized what could be achieved through this medium. But very soon after it was born, it was quite a small company back then, what everyone realized was that radio could be truly transformational. And in that moment of realization, everyone realized, the founders, Lord Reith, realized that what we need to do is make sure public service is at the heart of what the BBC does. And so our purpose was defined as to inform, to educate, and to entertain. And in the 95 years since that moment, this purpose has held true. It binds everything that the BBC does. And in the last 95 years, the BBC's grown. So you might recognize some of the brands through which you consume our content, whether it's news media, whether it's drama, sports, music, radio services, online on our websites through iPlayer. We have grown because our audiences have grown. We operate in the UK, we operate internationally. We have to react to the ways that means that our audiences are asking of us. And if you want to inform, educate, and entertain in a large and diverse and complex organization, how can you do that? What you start to understand is that you need to develop a set of principles and guidelines that can bind a complex organization as it evolves and reacts to the market opportunities and to the need, the customer need, the audience need, which help you navigate through things that you guys might recognize that the BBC is known for. Being trustworthy, impartial, transparent, a recognized brand name, one that takes child protection really seriously, one that takes accountability really seriously. So our guidelines and our frameworks really help us do that. But even then, we have to recognize that during that growth, the growth that we see in society, the growth that we see in the organization, that what we're also seeing is a growth in the different cultures that we are representing. And equally, the growth that we are seeing in the cultures that represent the BBC itself. That diversity of cultures is a truly great thing. It's something to be celebrated. It gives you quicker insight into different markets. It helps you understand what is happening globally for a certain audience segment in Africa or in Far East Asia. In the UK, it helps us understand, as the UK society is developing, how might the BBC react to that? So I've sort of touched on the fact that the BBC grew, our audience segments have grown, and you could say that this curve describes that, the hockey stick curve. And I think you've seen quite a few of these hockey stick curves today, whether that's the growth in the Bitcoin ecosystem, whether that's around cameras and imaging, whether that's around VR, AR, and all of the other things that are happening. So this curve also represents opportunity, because as those ecosystems have grown, new opportunities are opening up. This type of curve also represents demand. And so one way that you can meet demand is that you can scale up through your people. And over the last century, that's what lots of companies have done. We've hired more people, we've been able to meet that demand, and we've done a good job at it. All of us in this room will probably can relate to that. We're in a world right now where the demand exceeds our own human capacity to meet it. My fundamental belief is that AI, machine learning, and deep learning in particular, is going to help us meet that demand, because it allows us to scale beyond our human capacity. It is going to offer decision support to what we do, to our staff base. Now, I'm not talking about this type of AI, sentient AI, the type of AI that leads us to the singularity. I'm intellectually stimulated by that. I track what's going on. I'm really interested in that moment when it comes. What we're really talking about is networks, models that are moving towards learning. And these models, you feed data in and you get some results out. They're very good at recognizing patterns and retailing probabilities. And the thing with probabilities is that they're not certain. It's not one or the other. You're getting a result that you need to interpret. And normally for that, at this stage that we're at, you need people. But what we shouldn't forget that the two main things that I think this moment in the development of AI is going to enable, well, the first one is productivity. If you want to know how to react and meet your audience demand, if you want to reallocate your resources, if you want to become more efficient, if you want to optimize, deep learning-based systems and decision support systems will really help you become more productive. They'll allow you to grow and scale and meet that demand. Now, I think our ambition should be greater than that. So I'm also interested in all of those applications that are more creative. Through these learning-based systems, we're starting to see instances where patterns are emerging that humans would not have spotted before. We're starting to see just the embryonic capability of learning through a machine coming through. And so we should also recognize that through that is new opportunity, things untapped, potential untapped. But there's a risk. That untapped potential of artificial intelligence, machine learning, may come to a grinding halt because of fear. Normally when I speak about this, I hate putting up any picture around Skynet and the Terminator, but I think you'd all recognize that there is a great degree of fear. Maybe not about that future, maybe about a future where jobs are going to get displaced or lost, maybe around the lack of transparency of data going into these systems, and chatbots being racist, and classifying people as gorillas. There's a whole bunch of other things that come through that really manifest themselves as a moment of fear. And so what we have to recognize is that if we want to realize the potential of machine learning, here's the exam question. How might we introduce AI into such a diverse set of cultures which will come with their own views around what the fear is or the challenges are? I think that if you don't even try and answer that question, first thing that's going to happen is that you won't get through the door. People will put their barriers up. They will react. Society will react. So reflect on that. Try and understand what's the thing that we need to do to even have that conversation. How might we approach that conversation? The second is to realize that these capabilities, whether it's AI machine learning, which I'm focused on, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's AR, VR, they all get introduced in pieces, step by step, brick by brick. And as humans, what we like is we like to see the full picture. But often with these developments, you can't do that. But what can you do? Well, we can start to choose which bricks to build first. And we can decide, based on some cultural understanding of who our audiences are and who we are as an organization, which bricks should matter most. So for the BBC, we are there to inform, educate, and entertain. But we really care about well-being, social cohesion, inequality, making sure that information is disseminated equally. So any capability that allows us to do that better, to scale better, to reach people better, is the one that we're going to focus on. And it becomes a lot easier for the BBC to do business with others and for people to partner with the BBC if you're like-minded. Not that you have to be exactly the same as us, but if you share some of our values and principles and we share some of yours. So choosing which bricks to focus on to build up the overall capability that we're talking about, the wall that we're talking about, I think is really important. And often it can start with just one thing that will then ripple out. And a few speakers have used the ripple example earlier in the day, and I truly believe that. I think often you can really make massive progress by choosing carefully that first thing that you're going to focus on. And if you focus on it with those things in mind, well-being, social equality, then you will build consensus. You will bring cultures together which otherwise would be divergent. And you will be able to, for your own company and your own customer base, understand what balance you want to strike. On the one hand, you've got the huge opportunities through productivity and creativity. On the other hand, you need to be thinking about your ethics and your values, the responsibility that comes with the amount of data that you're collecting, and you can find a balance. Now, if you're finding that balance in partnership, it becomes a lot easier. There's a saying in the UK at least, I think in the US and maybe here in Bulgaria as well, which is, you should eat your own dog food. And it sort of come from the fact that companies, if they're selling a product, should try it themselves. They should try the technology themselves first to make sure it's something that people will want. I think alongside that, there should be an equivalent for culture. That if you as a company don't have the culture that you are trying to sell into or trying to promote into, then you won't succeed. There's going to be barriers to that. And so we need to start eating our own cultural dog food. We need to bring our communities along with us. We need to bring our organizations along. I, as an engineer, and I'm an engineer, would struggle to deploy any of the systems and capabilities that we've talked about today, the huge potential that you've all talked about, if we didn't recognize that we have to bring the rest of the organization along, and we have to work to bring society along in that change as well. Thank you very much.